It's Thanksgiving, and usually around this time is when I start getting questions about offseason scout, how to look objectively at the schemes, who do I need to study, what are things that I need to be doing to help my team get to the point where we're practicing on Thanksgiving, because typically this is around for a lot of states. This is usually around the fourth week of the playoffs, so where everybody's getting close to state championship. So most of the state is typically not practicing right now. We're also winding down a lot of times around Thanksgiving, the college football season, and people are starting to now project a little bit forward. What are the things that we need to do? How do we need to get better? And so one of the things that I uniquely have been able to do at almost every place that I've coached along the way is kind of be in charge of the self scouting, looking at it analytically, building things off of that, and then having ideas put forth on ways to attack the offseason. And really that's what you're building. The time from Thanksgiving all the way through probably mid to end of January should be focused on, as a staff, sitting down, looking objectively at the scheme, what we need to get better at. I think the other problem too is that everybody wants that quick fix. They want to give me, and I get a lot of this at this time too. Give me the playbook. What playbook? Do you have a playbook on the 4-2-5? Do you have a tight front playbook? Oh, hey, I just got the 2018 Georgia playbook, or I just got the Dave Aranda LSU playbook. I got this playbook from this guy. How, then it becomes, who else do I need to watch? And a lot of times, and this leads me into the first thing, is just the biases that we carry into. I've seen it many times of, we don't self scout during the season. That's a mistake. You should have somebody in charge of self scouting throughout the season, whether it's every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks. Have some sort of a review so that you can go back, because we have these biases, right? We tell ourselves these stories, and then we find data and we find things to make those stories correct. One of the biggest ones is survival bias. And so typically, in the playbooks, and I talk about Aranda and Saban and Kirby Smart, because those are kind of the Mount Rushmore, right, of these, or Haycock at Iowa State's another one that I get. Is these Mount Rushmore of defensive coordinators at the college level, and I need their playbook because their playbook is the best, and that's going to make my kids the best. And that's not necessarily the case. A lot of us are anchor biased towards what we learned and what we played in. And so for me, I have to constantly fight the urge to go back to when I was at Baylor, and the 4 down, the 4-2-5, Jimmy Johnson quarters, kind of that Rex Ryan, BTF blitz schemes. There are other ways of doing things. And so over my career at the high school level, I was able to kind of detach myself, but it's work, and you have to work on that. And so a lot of times you find yourself at a crossroad where, I know this one scheme, I know we need to do something different. Where do I start? But a lot of times, what you already have an idea, you can transform that into it. The other problem that we run into a lot of times is survival bias. And one of the more famous things that we have with survival bias is the picture of the World War II airplane, and the red dots are the bullets, and the white areas are the airplanes that didn't come back, right? So the airplanes that come back, they used to go look at where the bullet holes were. And then they're like, well, we just need to patch these up. And then a statistician, I think his name is Andrew Wald, who was like, guys, we're looking at it inversely. We actually need to look at the airplanes, where are the bullet holes not? Because the ones that don't come back are probably getting hit right there. Those are the areas that we need to do it. And so my point on this is, if you are at a successful program and you can't get over the hump, I need to find my edge. A lot of times it could be getting simpler, right? A lot of times it can be, we're running too much scheme. We're doing too many things. I'm trying to get too much into the call sheet each week. I remember that back in probably 2018 when I was at Midlothian, I was just trying to do too much coverage wise. And because I could, I had smart kids, I had really good kids, but we were just trying to do too much. And so you really start objectively looking at it. And there were a couple of things that we were really good at, and there were just things that we were just doing too much. So it was the illusion of kind of we were really good, but it was only because we were doing so many different things and it wasn't really working. And when you start looking at it analytically, and that's what the other thing too is that analytics kind of gets a bad word in the football vernacular, just because I think we look at like at the NFL level, a bunch of math nerds are putting out these stats. What does this mean? How can I do this? A lot of the stuff too is either white paper, which means that it's really just like for almost scientific in nature, or it's post-op, meaning that okay, this is great. I wish I would have known this in game. And so my advice really before we begin in this is you need to approach every day of the off season when you're sitting down and you're doing your self scout with an objective mindset. Get rid of your biases. There may be things that you need to work on that are like staples of your philosophies that, hey, we are a cover 3 team, but then you look at it and you're like, we're bad at cover 3, but we're really good when we run quarters, or we're really good when we run Tampa. Maybe we need to add more elements of that in there, or maybe it's the kids, maybe it's the teaching. So look objectively at what you are doing, so that way you come out of it with a clear mind and understanding what you're doing. Usually the biggest culprit is not the scheme itself, it's the pedagogy, it's the teaching of the actual concept. Are we all on the same page? I remember multiple times in different staffs of where we kind of sit down and it's like, the way the linebackers were being taught for pass coverage in a certain coverage didn't align with the secondary, or the front structure didn't align with how the linebackers were being taught the run fits, or the D line coach didn't understand certain techniques. And then the linebackers were fitting off of it in a certain way, and we just weren't getting what we wanted. And so whether it's run fits or it's pass coverage, you need to look at it as across the board. And that's why when you go to college and at the NFL level, a lot of times in the offseason, they clinic each other and the corner sits and listens to the defensive line coach kind of go through these day one installs, these basic foundational techniques, who we are, what we are about. And it's not necessarily the corners coach needs to know what the D line coach is, but just that there's a streamlined process of expectations, techniques, fundamentals, and there's an understanding of the defense at a baseline level from the front all the way to the back, or the back all the way to the front. And being on the same page is really part of that. So the first thing really that you do once you get all the film done, you get it cut up, you get ready to go, is you should be clinicking. And I'll never forget, Phil Bennett used to be the best at this. We would be sitting down, and it wasn't like a gotcha moment or anything like that, but it was more or less like, hey, that's not really what I meant by that, or, oh, now that makes sense of why we were making this mistake, because that wasn't really the intent of the teaching tool. This is, we need to do this. Hey, we aren't aligned here in the way we're fitting with the safeties and the linebackers. We need to change the way that we talk about that. And as a young coach, that really just kind of made me open my eyes to the fact that we are all interlinked. We all have links in a chain, and we all are connected together. So the other part of that, so first off, is teaching. It always starts with the coaches. If it starts with the kids, you're going to be wrong. It always should start with the coaches, and it should always start with the coordinator. So if you're a defensive coordinator and listen to this, the buck stops with you. You are the voice of reason, and you need to make sure that you're aligned. If you're in a co-coordinator situation, you two should be sitting down in the offseason daily, going over how things are going to mesh. And if you need to bring the head coach in, bring the head coach in. Typically in co-coordinator situations, the head coach is going to be kind of he's going to be on that side. So usually if it's a defensive coach, he's going to have co-defense coordinators. If he's an offensive coach, he'll have co-offensive coordinators, run and pass, that whole deal. If that's not the case, you need to make sure that there's one voice in terms of what is going to be called and what the expectation is. And if you need help, go ask the head coach to sit in those meetings. What was beating us should be the next question. Explosive tape should be the very first thing. So typically what I would do is any pass over 15 and any run over 10, I would create a cut up and we would just go through it. I would sort it the way that we typically do with personnel, set, which is it 2x2, 3x1, formation, and then the concept. And so what you end up doing off of that is either a kid ends up starting to be highlighted, hey, they are really attacking our right corner, or we're always getting shots into the boundary, or man, we're getting formation into the boundary and they're killing us on run game to the field. Those are all things that you can look through that explosive tape and look at that. Then we need to look in the mirror off of that and say, how can I get better as a coach? Not and a lot of times I is a dirty word in a coaching vernacular, coaching language, coaching facility, but it really starts with you. How can I get better as a coach? Are there different ways I can teach things? Are my kids showing up on this explosive tape? Maybe we're seeing the same explosive pass. We're blaming the defensive back, but maybe my linebackers really aren't helping them out in coverage. And that's typically a one thing that I normally see. I will die on this molehill because it's not a big hill, but I will die on the fact that linebackers in coverage is probably the worst coached position in all of sports from top to bottom. So if you're a linebacker coach, you're listening to this, do your defensive backs a favor and make sure you're teaching coverage with the same intent that you're teaching the run fits. We live in a passing world, even though, yes, teams still have to run the ball at the high school level, college level, and the NFL level. Passing coverage, passing is much more efficient than running. Make sure you're doing your job on the coverage end. The solution is a complete revamp of the teaching process. Typically is what happens is that it's not necessarily the scheme, it's how we're teaching it. Either I stole it from a playbook and I didn't really understand it. I need to go actually visit somebody that runs it and does it well, or I didn't relay the message down the line to the position coach. I'm not getting what I want out of that, and it was too late in the season to fix it. So these are the times, if it needs to get fixed, fix it. Make sure it gets fixed. Have hard conversations in the off season, and this is the time to do it. And typically the solution is going to be, I need to teach it better. We need to do a better drill. I need to create better ways of explaining it. Maybe I need to have more visuals. I need to find out the best way to teach it. The other thing too is a lot of times it's not the scheme. And I think that's playbooks are beautiful and they look awesome, especially these college playbooks that use Visio and PowerPoint. And they've got, the 30 staff members that are able to draw them and really and make them really pop. But a lot of times it's not the playbook itself that's special. It's the teaching of the fundamentals and the technique within it. I'm a big believer in technique over scheme. If I can teach multiple techniques, then I can expand that scheme to fit whatever I want. Not having the playbook is great. But a lot of the times, and I'll say this over and over again, a lot of times the answer is a simple answer. It's just, we need to maybe do a little bit less, or I need to teach the fundamentals better so that then I can expand the playbook later on. I can use interchangeable parts. I can use like as things instead of having to revamp and completely recreate the wheel every time I want to have a different call structure. And so technique, scheme, make the practice game like. The biggest question after just objectively looking at it, getting your mind right, how do I even start the process? So if you played 10 games then and didn't make the playoffs, you say you have about 60 to 75 plays a game, that adds up. That's a lot of plays. Right? So we have to make sure when we're doing this, right, we're looking at almost 1,000 plays. If you make it into a couple rounds deep into the playoffs, you are looking at somewhere between 7,500 to 1,000 plays, depending on the type of offenses that you're facing. And so that's a lot of plays to look at. And so what you want is kind of that old saying of like, how do we how do I eat how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time, right? So the easiest way to do this, and this is the way, this should be your start. And I usually would label these with numbers. So this would be 0.00. This would be the all plays. I would literally take every single play that we had on film from the season. I would take out any penalty, any pre-snap penalty. I would take out any timeouts because, we catch those too on the film, and any garbage time. So anytime we were up or we were down by 28, basically you put in all your backups. I don't want to review those plays. Because offenses aren't normal. I'm probably sitting there just calling base the entire time. And so what we want with that is we just want to get rid of garbage time. So that also starts eliminating a couple of plays. Maybe you have a couple hundred plays that come off of that. Sort your cut-ups. Do not look at these in just a mashup of just what the game came in, right? Or they're in order of the game. Personnel, set, which is 2x2, 3x1, formation, run, pass. This is a great way to one, either introduce maybe a younger coach into cleaning this up, right? Having everybody kind of look back through, let's clean up all the run calls. Let's make sure everything is called the same thing. Where are the redundancies? Okay, we keep calling this thing the same thing as this. These guys this is a different concept. Or, hey, these two are really kind of the same concept. Let's put these together. Or we're starting to see full field concepts. Let's come up with one word to have those, and then let's do that. Then you create cut-ups to review for the season. I always start with the explosive tape. Remember, 10 plus run, and that would be 15 plus for passes. Move to personnel, set, right? Create an all 11 cut up, right? 11 2x2 cut up, 11 3x1 cut up, 11 single width cut up, right? 10 personnel, you do the same thing. 21 personnel, you do the same, so on and so forth. Then you can make a first down. I want a possession and 10 cut up. What are teams doing in possession and 10 to us? What is that next first down? Let's look at a first down. Let's separate out all of the second down, third down, fourth down. Then we can make a red zone cut up. You can do field areas coming out, base zone, shot zone, which is in the middle of the field, going into the high red, low red, goal line. All of those should have those things, so that way you can look at it. You want to create this master list of all calls, and you can export this from Huddle. So if you are going in each week and putting in your call sheet and making sure those calls are correctly, you can actually pull those and export those and create an Excel file so that you know what your all call sheet is. The part with this all call sheet is that you should know and be able to draw up every single one of those calls. And so you want to be able to look at the end of the day, if you need to revamp your playbook, or you're going to redo your playbook, or you need to create a playbook, you want to have those all calls listed out, and you need to be able to pull them up when you're getting 11 personnel and you're seeing, man, we're really running this one particular pressure a lot. We're doing it a lot on first down, but it's not hitting the way that we expected it to. How are we teaching? Let's look at the playbook. How are we teaching this? What are we looking at? That's where you want to pull that from. I'm a big list guy. I make lists for everything. Sometimes my wife laughs at me because, even if I'm going to the grocery store and I need to get 3 things, I'm going to make a list because I don't want to forget anything. Because my mind races about 1,000 miles per hour, and I'll forget the one thing at the end of the list. And so I want to make sure that I have a list. And order leads to productivity. So if I have a list and I schedule this out, a lot of times if you just take the time to schedule out your off season, to sit down with everybody, take an hour and take 30 minutes and just sit down and schedule it out. Make a list of things that you want. That will lead to more productivity because you will be on task. If you're showing up every day and you have no idea, this is self-scout at the end of the season is a daunting task, and you need to get it done within a short period of time. So if you're in the playoffs, that time goes even further and you're adding even more plays. And you want to make sure when you come back from Christmas break or you're getting into kind of like pre-camp, maybe you're in college and you're at a small college and hey, I need this done by the time that I leave for the recruiting trail in February. We got to make sure that we're hitting the ground running on this. If you create a list, you set a schedule, right? So that list then leads to the schedule. The schedule then will lead to better productivity. You will have answers to what you need at the end of the day. There's no guessing on what is next because it's right there. Everybody knows, hey, tomorrow, every Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to spend an hour after school. We're going to go over our self-scout. This is the film that you need to watch. I don't care when you watch it. Make sure you watch it before Tuesday's meeting after school. Boom, done. If you want to meet in the morning, make sure it's there before our morning meeting in early in there. Prioritize your info. Prioritize the things that you need to get done first. That way, later on as you go, you can adjust the schedule as need be. Why cut-ups? Cut-ups, they make everything succinct. It puts it in a box. We're going to, hey, today, we are going to go over our 11 personnel creeper calls. We're going to look at what we're running. We're going to see if they work. And then we're going to either eliminate the fat or we're going to find answers for how to make these better. Or we're going to realize at the end of the day, we needed to run this more. And so cut-ups allow you to break down the information. I think about it in chunking. Most people that are coaches are high school coaches. That's the majority of them, right? And then there's less coaches as you go up the field. Being a teacher is important. Coaching and teaching are the exact same thing. Teaching is coaching, coaching is teaching. It's the exact same thing. You're just doing one on a field and you're doing the other in the classroom. So chunking is a word that people have heard and that you understand. If we chunk things together, hey, we're going to look at 11 personnel today. We're going to look at 21 personnel today. We're going to look at all of our coverages versus play action passes today. However you want to do it, you can create however you want, but we are putting it in and we're objectively looking at one specific thing. That way I'm not distracted by a bunch of stuff. I don't want to be watching all 11 personnel and one clip is a run play. The next clip is a play action play. The next clip is an RPO. And we're sitting here arguing back and forth on the run fit for power when really we need to be fixing the coverages, right? We have a good run defense. I'm worried about the coverages down the field. We gave up a lot of shot plays. I know how to fit power. Our kids are going to be able to fit power tomorrow, today, and a year from now, but we've got to figure out the answer on these deep shots. So what I don't want is to be going through this film and not have a plan of action. That's why you short your cut-ups. That's why you chunk it. It makes the task less daunting as well, because I know what's next. I've got a smaller, it's a lot easier to look at 25 clips than it is to look at 1,000 clips. Because if I got that 1,000 number, it's mental. We're all human beings. If I got 1,000 number, I'm like, man, this is going to take forever. I don't really want to be here today. Right. But if I got 25, I'm like, oh, we can get through 25. Okay, here, let's go. Let me get my notepad out. Let's start working through this. Let's start getting through this. And so I think that it too, the number is there, right? We like to have the countdown. Right? When you're working out, I want to see that stopwatch. I want to see that countdown. How many more reps do I have? And how many minutes do I have in here? We want to see that countdown. So it's the same thing when you're doing the coaching side of it. It creates a way to attack the data too. You know, a lot of times if you pull these Excel sheets or you look at the data, man, there's a lot of data. How can we make this concise? What are we? And so by making by personnel, down and distance, field area, you're chunking that data. You're making it a lot easier, and you're starting to paint a picture of your defense. Trends appear quicker when they're sorted because you can look at them. It's objective. They're right there. I'm not having to look through and trying to figure out, okay, this one was a play that I need to look at. This one's a play that I need. Oh, down here's another play that I need. No, they're all together. I can look at it. If you have somebody too that is a wizard with Excel sheets, again, you have all of this information. If you're using it on Huddle or wherever you're inserting your data, you have all this information. Pull it off and start being able to look at it alongside the film. So the purpose of each cut up, well, again, we never want to do anything on the field. We don't want to do anything without purpose. It's the same thing in your self-scout. You want to have a purpose to everything. So every cut up has a purpose. Personnel and set. See how you attacked offenses and then in return, how they attacked you. Okay. Vice versa. Remember, offenses control what's going on and they're going to react to the way that you attack them. So it's not necessarily, maybe there's a trend. Hey, every time on first down, I'm calling this pressure or this pressure, right? Or, hey, we don't call any pressures on first down. We're kind of just playing base every time on first down. Maybe we need to get a little bit more aggressive. And then for the call, see when and where you're making these calls and how offenses took advantage or why it worked out. A lot of times, there were a few times that I found that a call that we thought was really good on first down was actually a really good third down call for whatever reason. It affected the protection or things like, hey, we need to eliminate calling this on first down. Let's just try and create a package on third down that we can run this call and do it different ways. Or, hey, every time we punctured the B gap, we had, negative EPA on this, or we were really efficient in this. But when we were attacking the edges, teams kind of took care of it and it wasn't that big of a deal. And so, hey, we need more B gap puncture pressures, and let's move away from maybe some of these like fire zones or these edge pressures that we thought were really good. And again, I'm just making these up. So down and distance, view trends on what you called. I think that's the other thing is, when you get into a season, we find that comfort blanket and it's like, it's a gotta have it play right here. I'm going to go to my gotta have it play, and you call the same thing. Remember, they're self-scouting you. They're scouting you too. So if you're having a tendency, this is one of those things too of it. A lot of times the buyer's remorse or the hindsight's 2020 on the back end of this is like, man, I wish I would have known this during the season. That's why you want to self-scout during the season. That's why you take the time to break down the film, to data insert and look at it objectively so you can see trends, so that you don't get to this point in the season and you say, man, I called a blitz on every first down. Or every time it was third and long, I called a max pressure with cover zero and we gave up a ton of deep shots. Maybe don't run max blitz cover zero on 3rd and 10. Right? Maybe we need to let's kind of invent a different way that we can run kind of an umbrella coverage or Tampa coverage, or maybe we want to have Tampa simulated pressures, things like that we can introduce into the ecosystem. So I'm not calling max pressures on 3rd and 10. It's also for the other coaches to remind you next year when you're in that first game of the season, it's 3rd and 10 and you're trying to itch that scratch, you're trying to scratch that itch of 3rd and 10. I need to run a max pressure, and they got a Division I kid out there at outside receiver. Hey, coach, remember we don't want to run max pressures right here. We've got that Tampa check that we've got in. Okay, yeah, I remember that. Okay, let's go with that. Okay, those are the things this is why everybody needs to be involved in this as well. Is so that you have somebody there. If you're a coordinator, you also have that quality control on your own call sheet. And then two, you can make specific play cutups too. If you notice for whatever reason, hey, we never fit counter correctly and we saw counter a lot. Well, it's probably because you didn't fit it correctly. So I'm going to make a counter cutup and we are going to sit down and look at all the different counters. And you can even go further. We want to do the counter GYs. We want to do all the counter GTs. We want to do 21 personnel counter. I want to look at all of these. I want to see what this is. Maybe you see a lot of buck sweep. We want all the buck sweep. I want to put them all right here. Wide zone. I want to put all the wide. You can do specific plays, all the Y cross, because Y cross, everybody loves Y cross, right? That's the play 101 in high school and NCAA right now. So you can make specific cutups. And two, by looking at this objectively, you're starting to see where you need to have these cutups. So how do I structure them? That's the next question. So first of all, establish the fact that you need cutups. How are we going to structure them? Again, I did personnel and set, breakdown by each personnel group, and then by set, 2x2, 3x1, 2x1, etc. Use efficiency data to give you perspective. The nice thing is if you are a huddle team, Huddle already has the efficiency tab in there. You just have to literally put it in there. And then once you set it, you can then look and you can, again, if you wanted to do this, you can actually pull this from on an Excel sheet if you want to create a paper copy for you, or they have it within the new Huddle. So get one of your young coaches to look at this. And if you're one of those young coaches, show the old coaches how they can look at this efficiency data. By call, group your calls in families. One, this will show you, do we have too much? Are we putting too much of a mental load on our players? Or are we is it too convoluted? We have just too many buckets worth of calls. We have our cover one creepers here, but then we also have Tampa creepers, and we have cover three creepers, and we have quarters creepers, but then we have fire zones, and we have 5-man pressure half field zones, and we have our 5-man cover. You get where I'm going with. You can get to these, next thing you know, you got about 100 buckets, and you're like, No wonder we're not producing anything, or no wonder we have a bunch of buses, because our fire zones are essentially our 3 under 3 deep, but then we also have the same path, but now it's a 5-man pressure when it's half field zone, or we're doing something else of it, and they don't understand how these things correlate. So use these to see deficiencies, upgrade pedagogy, create similar calls. It was funny. I was talking to a defense coordinator at the college level, and when he was a GA at a certain spot, they were looking at it, and one of the things that they realized was, man, we need more trap two pressures. We need more of these 5-man pressures where we're running palms or we're running trap twos behind it, because they're really successful. And it's because, we were playing a lot of cover one on third and medium, and every time we would run a 5-man pressure with trap two behind it, we'd have success. Well, we need to build more of those calls out. We need to remind ourselves to call those more. And so that's one of the ways that when you go through this and you look at your calls, or you can see, one time we did the Aranda diner. I was at a school one time. We ran the old Aranda diner, basically the double edge pressure, ends rip inside and then drop everybody on the out, and it was like a Tampa drop, but we never really ran Tampa other than this one pressure. Linebackers didn't really understand how to expand. The corners played it like palms because we weren't trapping. So like, it was a terrible call, but we called it like 10 times, and it was successful for the offense, like 8. So that's an 80% success rate for the offense, 20% success rate for defense. It was like, okay, let's not call that anymore. Or why don't we teach it correctly so we get we get what we want, or let's call it in better scenarios, and not necessarily just as, hey, this is a cool call, I want to get it in, let's just throw it here. Down and distance, each down scenario should be reviewed in context with efficiency data too. How efficient are we on P&10? How efficient are we on the second first down? How efficient are we on our second down calls, our early down calls? If you want to lump all the early down calls, that's a good one too. Typically, if it's first through second and 6 is usually what I did at the high school level. And so that's another good one to look at, and separate your third down calls, third and short. And two, these are subjective. So if you feel like 3rd and 3 to 6, so 3 and 3 and 6, that's actually a better way of putting them together than do it. And your short yards is only 1 and 2. Sometimes too, 7 to 10 is different than 11 plus. If you get 11 plus, sometimes offenses will run the ball on third down. So just understanding like where they are. The nice thing too is about the new huddle, you can kind of use those to kind of see where the cutoff is. So where's the cutoff for the run? Where's the cutoff for the pass on those third downs? Now, I've been talking a lot about efficiency data, and what does that mean? So if you're like, hey, coach, we're not a huddle, or hey, I want to create my own so that I have this in-house, what's the easiest way? These is an easiest way to kind of create a zero-sum game, right? Did we win the down or did we lose the down? And then be able to project that across. So first down, typically I wanted anything less than 3 yards. Second down, less than half. Third and fourth down were basically just win rates. Did we win the down? Did they get a first down? Did they not? That's going to be, so basically it's a win. So if they didn't get a first down, no, then we won that down, and then we were able to do that. This is a simple efficiency. And again, like I said, Huddle, I think, does this already. It has a tab on there already. I think it's called the EFF tab. You can track each of the 3 main points: personnel, set, call, and then down and distance. That's something that I did on each of these downs. And again, it's already in Huddle. So why efficiency data? It's easily to pinpoint bad or underutilized schemes. So you start seeing, hey, we're calling this call on first down. It's only winning at about a 33% rate. Let's go back and let's look at all these calls on first down and let's see what it was. Maybe it's hey, this is what it is. Our nose isn't crossing face right here. He's holding the gap. We're a gap short on the other side. Or, hey, the blitz path, we're not really taking the angle, or we're spilling and we should be boxing. We're boxing, we should be spilling. Usually that's it's the teaching part of it. It could also just be just bad. It's just not a good scheme for the offenses that you're seeing. We keep, I love my A gap backer plug, but we're getting a lot of Y zones. So they're just running away from the pressure. It's not really working. Or we're burying guys up and we're just not getting any movement, or we're moving and teams have kind of figured out that we're a movement-based team and they're doing that. So the other answer with this is player pedagogy. Is one player constantly showing up? Hey, we called this blitz to the boundary. Our boundary linebacker, it's just, he's a better cover guy than he is a blitzer. Maybe our Mike linebacker isn't great in coverage. Maybe we need to flip the Mike and the Will. Maybe we need to have a money backer so the money backer is going to the passing strength. Maybe we need to do some things like that. What are we good at? What are we bad at? And then why? You have to understand the why in order to get better. So it can't just be, well, we're bad at this, let's just not run it. It could just be that you need to tweak the pedagogy. It could be, and two, what this is going to do is down the road, it makes you more multiple because you understand kind of the roadmap to how you got here. The other thing, and to go back to the very beginning of this, is when we understand what we're good at, we don't have to have a bunch of stuff. So, hey, let's focus on what we're good at. Let's kind of throw away the bad stuff, or if it's easily fixable, let's fix it so that we can then be better at it. And then again, this creates your offensive study, because the next question I get after self-scout is, who do I need to watch? And so what do I need to watch? So these are all ways that once I understand where we are, and then how we want to go about it, now I can then attack the off season. Who do I need to go visit? Who do I need to go talk to? Can I find a clinic on that? Can I find information on that? And then this is also too a way of developing new ideas. Adding kind of, if you're at, and I've been in this, of where you've been in a scheme for so long, you've been in a coaching staff for so long. Let's say your coaching staff has stayed together for a long time. You need to find ways to interject new ideas, just so that you're not getting into the, well, that's the way that we've always done it, which is always the one thing that you don't want. The setup. So the way that I did this is I had a very specific column. So I had, and I'm going to go through them. I'm just going to list. So this is boring, right? This is the boring part, but this is important. You need to know. So this is how I typically had everything set up. I had down and distance. I had the personnel. Then I had the set. Remember, set is 2x2, 3x1, 2x1. Then I had the coverage, and then I had boundary coverage, because if you're a split field team, maybe we ran quarters to one side, but we ran palms to the other, or vice versa. What the actual play was, so what's the offensive play? Then I used a backside route or an extension. So sometimes, again, if it's just a mirror route, I would just put mirror. A lot of times too, if it was power, but we were getting a bubble screen to the back, I would just go power with bubble. So that way we could label it as an RPO. DS was a deep shot, and it's just a simple yes or no. That way too, I could just go and quickly make my deep shot tapes. Who was the target? So who was actually getting the play? You can do that. I had a letter system, but then I worked with a guy that he didn't want the letter system. He just wanted, is it one left, two left, one right, two right, three running back? You can maybe even level the tight end or the H-back, depending on what you wanted. So it doesn't matter how you do it, but just the way that you target it. And then the result, gain, loss, and then did it attack the field or did it attack the boundary? You could even do right, left. Those were that. And then all I would do really is after the call, obviously we would then insert a defensive call in there. Normally I would put defensive call behind down and distance. And then by the defensive call, that's where I would insert the efficiency data on huddle. So other cut-ups, specific concepts, run pass. I think I hit on that. Motions, snap motions. So motions that are moving at the snap of the ball, push motions, anything out of the backfield, anything pushing us to the flat, change of strength motions, jet motions. Normally too, like I would even make like a wheel tape. I would make an all wheel tape. So anytime we saw a wheel route, I wanted to see what they were doing from it. Maybe there's a concept that you're just seeing over and over again. Cross country is becoming a really big one, or Yankee, where you get in the post and the over. Maybe you want to watch, hey, I want to watch all the 2x2 condensed. I want to watch all the 3x1 condensed, 2-point plays, gadgets. It ways teams attack you. The 2-point plays I think is important. And then another one on top of that is all your fourth downs that teams went for it. So maybe there's a tendency for you on calling those field areas, base zones. So essentially from the 20 to the 40, shot zone 40 to 40, and then going in. So you're 40 to 25, high red 25 to 15, low red is 14 to about 7 to 5, just depending on how you want to detail it. And then goal line. So you can make a million different cut-ups. It really depends on what you want to do and how deep you want to get into. So defend, and then let's translate it. So let's switch now. Let's translate this in. We've looked at it. Now, what do we do? So defend what you see. Now, if you're in Texas, like I was, and you're rotating every 2 years, a lot of the times, though, you have the core group of teams that you know you're going to see. Or, hey, we know that we're always going to see this team in the playoffs, or we know that we need to beat this team to get into the playoffs. So you want to defend what you see. You want to build your defense around what you're seeing. So don't run stuff to run stuff. I think that's the biggest thing. I was talking to a young coach the other day. He was really interested in, the Saban cover 7 stuff. And that's great. And I think that if you want to get technical and you want to get into it, I think you want to learn that stuff because it is one of the best schemes in all of football. The problem is that you're at the high school level. How are you going to teach it? How are you going to run it? Right? It's man match. So what are you going to do against a scrambling quarterback? And then 2, there's layers of things like, do you really need to have every single call in it? Do we need to have, switch? Do we need to have bracket? Do we need to have, mod, and meg? Do we need to have mix? Do we need to have all of the different stuff, that we could go on and on? Do I need to carry Seahawk, Stubby, Stump, Mustang, Stud, Steeler? Like, do I need to have all of these, or is there a base level that I can do? I think it's good to have for ideas, but again, we don't want to run stuff to run stuff. We want to know our why. I go back to it's techniques over schemes. It's your players. It's not your plays. How can we maximize the players that we have on the field? If I've got a bunch of D1 kids, I can help them collegiately by running some man match stuff, but do we need to do that? Is that something that we need to have in there? Could it be just, I need to teach them different techniques and varied techniques. So when they go to college, they're better off they understand all the footwork that they need. We can vary it. Hey, we're a quarters team, but we're going to vary our different techniques to kind of hide our coverages and hide our intentions. If you're in a run heavy league, do we really need to have all these coverages? Right? What do we need? It was interesting. When I went to go coach with my dad at life school, we knew we weren't going to be very good. So we needed to be able to maximize the box. We needed to be able to do things. And by me going from 6A to 4A, it became more run oriented. So these were things where I needed to experiment with putting in a cover 3, dropping a safety down. It was very clear early in the season, we need to find ways to get and manufacture a loaded box, because if we're not doing that, we're just going to get ran on because we're not strong enough up front. So, that's the other thing. Am I moving to a pass-oriented league? We've always been spot drop cover 3. We're moving into a pass-oriented league. We're moving up in competition. The team that's beating us is running spread. Maybe we need to create more nuanced ways of coverage. That's another thing that I've seen a lot of coaches come to me about. It's like, hey, we've been able to get away with this for years, but times have changed. This other school, maybe it's one of these suburban schools now, has this really good quarterback. The coach there, they do 7-off-7, they do everything. They pass the ball all the time. They're killing our spot drop coverages. How can we play more match concepts? What's an easy way to teach that? And not necessarily even going away from cover 3 and playing quarters, but maybe going to more of a match 3 and maybe weak rotation instead of always doing the same thing. Having great athletes doesn't mean you need to run more schemes. Now, there's a fine line between the more is more guys and then the less is more guys. And you see this at every level. There's teams that excel at doing less. Iowa's a great example of it. They just don't do a lot. But then there's teams that excel at doing a lot, like Georgia. Georgia does a ton of stuff, right? And those two, both have really good players, right? They're both at Power 5, right? They're both at a high level. But it's one is more about technique. The other is more about let's attack what the offense is doing. And we have really, really good players. But it doesn't both of those teams have good players. You can have success doing whatever you want. That's one thing too that I found was, when you really get down to it at the high school level, a lot of times less is more. Is that I need to do more technique work with these guys and get them into doing different ways of doing things so that we can, one, disguise it, but also give them more tools in the toolbox. But then also too, of just understanding that I don't need to overload them with a lot of stuff. If we do a bunch of stuff, we're going to have more busts. And so understanding kind of where you are. Now, if you are a senior heavy team and you're going in and, hey, we are right there, coach. We're right there. We just need to get that little bit of extra edge. That's when you add the scheme. It's not when, hey, you got a bunch of freshmen. Let's run all these coverages. Let's run all these pressure pass. Let's make things simple for them. Let's get really good at what we are so that we can then, like a layer, we can onion it as they get older. Cut the fat too. A lot of times there were things that I thought was really cool. I worked with a great guy, Robert Irwin at Midlothian, and he was our D-line coach. He was always, he loved it. He would love our third down meetings because I would always come up with something crazy. And then at the end of the day, he would be like, coach, I got to be able to teach us. I got to be able to teach us. Is this going to work? Or, hey, I just don't know if this is going to work against this protection. And being able to like, okay, that's right. We don't need to just run it because I came up with it. Another guy, where Charles Wheeler at Mesquite Horn, was always be the same way. He'd be like, okay, we got to teach this to the kids. Can we get this taught, or how can we simplify it to where it's going to work? So I'm one of those, like, I'm a big idea guy, and I love drawing stuff up and doing this. And hey, this is how we can attack this protection. But if you've coached high school at all, Tommy right guard doesn't necessarily always slide when he's supposed to slide. He doesn't always block big on big when he's supposed to block big on big. And so you have to create these kind of universal concepts, or what it really comes down to is, we have the best player on the field, we're going to blitz him, or we have the best player on the field, how can we create pick stunts to just get him a free rush? And so a lot of times that's what it is. I think the other thing too is, in exit interviews with your seniors, ask them what their favorite play was. Ask them what their favorite concepts were, because typically those are the ones that they're most comfortable with. If you got some younger kids on the team and you know that, hey, we know you're going to have to step up, what are the things that you like to do? What are the things that you find easy? And then be able to amplify those and then have them explain to you why that is. And so that way you understand what their why is. What are we deficient at is a hard question, because we kind of understand inherently what we're bad at. Hey, coach, my corners can't cover. Or, hey, coach, we got no linebackers this year. Hey, coach, I'm real small on the D-line. Okay, well, let's create a plan in the spring for technique and pedagogy. Let's understand, hey, if we're small, we're going to be a movement-based defense. What are we going to need to fix on that? Let's go talk to other movement-based defenses, guys that do movement-based style. What are the answers that offenses have figured out for you? What are the problems, areas that you come? How do you answer those situations? Don't necessarily, if you're a big tight front team and you're trying to mash heads and two gap your nose, and you've got a kid that's 210, 215 pounds, that's not going to work. We need to move him. We need to use quickness for advantage. So the way that so the next step in this is, after we've made our cut-ups, we watched the film. Now we kind of have an idea and a roadmap for what we would need to do. Now we're starting to build from pre-spring all the way to spring and then into the summer. So pre-spring, technique, teaching heavy. It's okay to sit in a classroom for 30 minutes and go over a new scheme or go over old concepts to make sure that the kids understand it before you move on to the field. Right? The field should be the reward. On top of that, you should be working on technique. One year, I'll never forget, and I think I've told the story before, is like, we were really bad at breaking on the ball for whatever reason. We understood coverage. We did really good. We couldn't get any interceptions. And so I worked and I created drills, and we just worked in pre-spring break mechanics. I went out and I talked to a bunch of DB coaches. I went out and talked to some college coaches, athletic guys, guys that are doing like draft and stuff like that. Hey, how are you working these? What are the things we did? Came up with the hex rings, bought some hex rings, started doing that. And then all of a sudden, the next year, we had like 18, 19 interceptions. I think only 2 of them were from the linebacker spot. So we ended up having I think it was 16 interceptions in the secondary. I think we had 5 kids on the all district team. And it was a simple fix. It had nothing to do with the scheme. It literally had me taking the time and teaching them break mechanics. So spring, once we go from pre-spring, so it's like kind of that winter set, pre-spring, so into spring, less technique, more small side games, getting them football ready. If you are in a state that has spring football, I need to prepare them for spring football. So that way I like to pre-spring, we install everything in the classroom. Then you kind of have that it's not pre-spring but it's not spring ball. We should be installing things, but we're doing it almost like a simulated short practice. A lot of times we would take like 30 to 45 minutes and we would actually simulate a practice. We would go, 10-minute indie, we'd have 10-minute of pods, and then we'd have 10 minutes of team. And we would just hit through everything and we would get through it and we would literally install. So we install things on paper, PowerPoint, classroom in pre-spring. We're installing it quickly right there in spring. And then we're going to spring ball and we're installing everything again in spring ball in a traditional football setting. Then we do the whole cycle again in the summer. So by the time we get to fall, we've installed the defense like 3 or 4 times. That's the problem. If you get to August and that's the first time you're installing something, you're wrong. It's not going to work. You're going to get in trouble. You're just wasting your time. Glaring stats and problem formations also are things that what did I get from the explosive tape? What are the completion rates and averages on certain concepts? And then are we losing out on deep shots? I took all of those as a secondary coach and we worked those. I always did a top 10 pass concepts 2x2, 3x1, and I would draw them up and we would run them over and over and over again against all of our coverages. So that way, again, we're getting in pre-spring, we're getting in spring, we're getting in spring ball, we're getting in summer, and then the next thing you know, we're getting into the fall. So by the time that we get to September 1st, we've seen this a million times. I'm going to just get on a soapbox here. Why analytics? If you use analytics to determine your practices, I think if you just look at analytics and you're just like, it's just a bunch of numbers, football is one on football. Yeah, that's great. But you also need to understand what's working, what's not. It sets and determines your practice. It creates the offseason plan for you. What you see in games should be what you practice, self and opponent scout, take what we saw in the season into the spring, into the summer, into the following fall, work on the techniques that need to be worked on. Maybe we're not very good blitzing team. What are ways that I can make us a better blitzing team? Maybe we need better pass rush. How can I help those defensive ends with better pass rush moves? Maybe we're just shaking the vending machine and they're just running down the center of somebody. So those are all things that we need to make sure that we're focused on and putting it into practice, which would be your call. So I need, I take this from Midlothian. We needed to look at two read. We were really good in quarters, but our two read just wasn't there. And it was the way that the linebackers and corners were working situations, teaching. I used yards per pass were high in sky, but completion percentage was down. So we were still having big plays. Why were we having big plays in quarters but it was kind of like feast or famine, right? We were really good when we brought 5. So, hey, we need to probably become a 5-man pressure team. Stay away from creeper sims. Let's really send that. Understanding third down. Hey, stress was really working for us. Stress is my version of basically running quarters to trips. It was better than us, than stump or stubby special. Needed to reevaluate our blitz coverage because it just wasn't working. And so these were all things that I took. And then when we went from 2018 to 2019, these were all things that we cleaned up. 5-man pressures, right? Creating coverages behind those 5-man pressures, stress to trips. Let's just live in it. And then if we need to, we can run stump in certain areas when we need it. And then reevaluated our blitz coverage and how we needed to do that. Were we being too aggressive? Were we not teaching the linebackers where their drops were? And then putting it into practice with formation. So there's your calls. Now we need to do formations. We were really good versus 3x1. I had a great plan every week, and that was intent. I wanted to make it intentional that we had a good plan for 3x1, and that's why we were really good at it. 2x2 needed work, especially tight end flanker. We were getting isolated on the on the flanker. Tight ends were kind of bait. Needed to figure out a way. We were getting too many deep shots out of that. So that was something that I wanted to work on in the off season. Needed to have better answers in 2-back. So when we were getting 11 personnel, some of the way that I was teaching coverages or where we were getting attacked, we needed to be better at that. We blitzed too much versus max protection. So when we knew we were getting in 12 personnel and 22 personnel, we needed to have a better way of defending max protection. We needed to quit blitzing it. Really good versus deep shots, except versus 2 tight end, which means we were getting isolated outside. So what I did, those were points of emphasis in 2018. I worked post and fade routes every single week. And then if you work what is important, it will be important. So again, we were really good at 3x1 and formations because that was important to me. And then therefore we knew when we went in, we were going to have those 3x1s were going to be really good. So just want to say, if you're still listening, thank you for listening to this and supporting Match Quarters. Off-season self-scout is a big, important, and it should be almost overemphasized, because this is what is setting you up for the future, and it's setting up your off-season from A to Z. I have a ton of resources on Match Quarters if you're interested. So make sure that you go in there, just look at off season or fall to camp, winter camp. How are we doing all that stuff? This is something like that, one of the things that I miss about coaching is this off-season part and that self-scout part, and just kind of going through the nuts and bolts and how are we teaching? Because I'm a big believer in teaching is the key. Techniques are the key. So again, thank you for joining me on this. And then hopefully you were able to pull out some nuggets from this and start really evaluating self-scout. Now, the one caveat to this is if you want to do this in season, you just need to whittle down to what is the most important things that we need. That way you're not spending just a massive amounts of time going over self-scout data when you need to be working on the next opponents. But don't sit there and go basically blind into the forest, having no idea what's behind you or what's in front of you, because you are not looking at your self-scout data. Because remember, what you're putting on tape is what offenses are going to use to beat you. So make sure that you're looking at it and evaluating and constantly being open to ideas and doing new things, and be aware of your bias. Thank you for joining me today. Really, really appreciate it.